Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, jointly put on today by our Fabo partners at Genesys. We are lucky enough today to be joined by a couple of industry experts. So we've got Robin O'Reilly from Genesys and Tracy Madgwick from the Residential Tenancies Authority. And our session today is the state of customer experience, where we're going to go through some key insights for CX leaders from the State of Customer Experience report. The session will see us unpack those findings. The report itself is based on a global survey of more than 5,000 consumers and more than 1,000 CX leaders. And it's really giving us some interesting data around the trends that are shaping the Australian New Zealand market. Great opportunity with research is not only it lets us get underneath it and see what it's telling us, but it makes us actually think about whether findings are different from our expectations or perceptions. So looking forward to that today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of our guests, we hope the session provides some interesting insights into what the market is telling us, what our customers are telling us, and where those gaps are between what we as organisations think is the priority versus what our customers are telling us. To give you some insights to take back to your business, equally give you something to think about and really reflect on as far as what's the state of things within your organisation. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A, but I will encourage everybody, if there's some elements around some questions that I'm asking that really pique your interest, use the chat or the QA feature and put down thoughts, comments or questions for me. So I'm Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact, and I am your moderator for today. I'll just run through some quick general housekeeping with you. As I said, we'd love to see the interaction. It's not often you get two experts at your control, really. You can ask the questions if you've got some learning things there, and we'll tap into the expertise on display. There's no need to take too many notes. You'll get a recording of the webinar as always. As I said, if you've got questions, use the QA button or the chat feature, either one. If the question's in relation to what we're talking about, I will step in and ask it then and there. If it's something that's more general or connected to something that we're going to be talking about further, I'll hold off and we'll get to it in time. So if you're listening through headphones or speakers and you have any issues with your connection, just use the raise hand button on the screen and one of the team will jump in and try and help. Alternatively, you can actually go back to your registration and tap in via the telephone numbers provided. Okay, we're now going to get to the fun stuff. I'm going to introduce our panel for today. As I said, super lucky to have two experts here with us today. Firstly, Robin O'Reilly, Head of Resolution Management for APAC for Genesys, and Tracy Madgwick, who is the Chief Customer Experience Officer at the Residential Tenancies Authority. Robin, Tracy, welcome. Thank you both for joining us. Super excited to have you here and, really excited to talk about some of the findings that this report has actually given us. And I guess for me, the standout going through it was some of those gaps and disconnects between customer expectations and the service delivery that customers actually receiving in the market. And I guess for me, that just points to opportunities for us to think differently about our services, opportunity for us to really dig down on some of the things that highlighted they're really after, such as personalisation and tailored services. Of course, we can't have research that doesn't touch on AI. So we'll certainly go into some of that and how we see that both from an organisational lens and also from a customer lens. But Robin, I might start with you. And if I think about some of the highlighted stats that were in the report, there were some interesting ones around AI adoption and leveraging emerging AI opportunities to enhance the customer experience. We're certainly starting to see more organisations in the Australian market going live with new AI products. I was probably surprised that only 42% of CX leaders cite AI as a top priority. What do you think's driving that number? And were you surprised by that number?
Thanks, Fran, and hi everyone, and thank you for joining. I just quickly touch on the research. We're excited about this research, as Fran said. It is global research, but we do break it down firstly into the APAC region and then into ANZ. And often we don't get stats that are really specific to our region. And so that's what's exciting to us. And we are different in this region. We already knew that, but we are different in this region to our counterparts in the rest of APAC. In terms of your question, Fran, I think I wasn't necessarily surprised about it. And I think that word around using AI or prioritizing AI, what we see is that a lot of customers are unsure where to start, and therefore they don't necessarily put it at the top of their priority list. AI can be overwhelming. They know they should be doing something, and we talk about this quite a lot at our customer events that we host. And this year we had CX tours, and it was talking to customers, quite a few of them were really relieved that they actually weren't the only ones that hadn't started on that journey yet. So I think in terms of prioritizing, they really struggle to identify the best ways to get their AI to be working with their teams. So our recommendation is that they really need to start looking at just really simple use cases. What could they implement in their business that will make a big difference, A, to their agents, but B, to their customer experience? And so luckily at Genesys, we've created some great tools now. They've just been released called AI Studio and AI Guides, and they provide built-in intelligence and strong guardrails, which makes it much easier for organizations to start that journey into AI. And I honestly believe that if organizations take a look at those tools and take a breath and think about what is it that they really want to achieve, what's that one simple thing, then they will start to prioritize that AI and it will become higher for them. So in terms of 42% of CX leaders, I think that's probably accurate. I know that there's plenty out there that would like to do more of it, but it's really that feeling of being overwhelmed about where to start.
Yeah, I think you raised some really good points there, Robin. Certainly, a lot of organisations that we speak to are grappling with that. Which thing do we go first with? If you think about, because the report also touched on the expectation from consumers and the view that, there's a real confidence that AI will actually improve service quality. So speed, service, across the board, there's confidence in consumers, which I think is really great to see. It's certainly a maturing of that consumer lens. Do you think, and I guess the research itself provides organisations the opportunity to then think about, well, what does our strategy look like? Does it line up with that? Because again, the consumers, the statistics was referring to consumers' view next 2 to 3 years as crucial, and as a period that they are confident AI will improve those services. So with that in mind, and certainly given the customers that you're working with, do you see the start of that strategic plan really starting to think about what are the areas that customers will see that improvement and that change?
Yeah, and
And is that how you're
yeah,
supporting customers to kind of build a plan?
it's definitely about supporting them, and it's about saying, where do you want to start and where do you want to go on that journey? And I think that's the key to that. So while as consumers we're all excited, we want to have a little bit more self-service, we want that to be hyper personalized and those sorts of things, there's still a lot of customers out there that again are concerned about how to get going. They know that they need to be thinking about responsible AI. That's another part that really puts people into the back seat around that whole governance
Yeah.
around it. And so those are the kinds of conversations that we're having with customers. It's around think of that simple use case, and then you need to make sure that when you're infusing AI into your business processes, productivity tools, and your critical decisions, that you need to know what AI is actually doing. And we don't want to scare people by asking them all of those questions, but it is actually really important. They've got to make sure that the AI is accurate, that it's bias aware, that it's not violating anyone's privacy. All of those things are really important. And how do you govern that AI
Yeah.
without slowing its growth or innovation? So I think in many respects, as consumers, we think AI is that really easy thing and everyone should be able to do it. And it is relatively simple, but from a consumer perspective, from an organization's perspective, there's still a lot of gap in terms of that strategy of how a organization feels confident to deliver
Yeah.
a really good AI strategy. And they also don't want to get that first use case wrong because it can upset customers. And that means, and we've seen in those stats as well, that they will go somewhere else. If they don't get
Mm.
that good experience after X number of times, then they will go to their competitors. So I think there's a lot that has to be unpacked. And that's where, Genesys, our partners, ecosystem, we can have those conversations with customers to get them to think about what do they want to achieve with their AI, and have they got all of the business processes in place to be able to support that moving forward.
You're right. Governance is a major key and element that organisations need to get right. What do they say? You've got one chance to make an impression sometimes, and we've seen a lot of noise and stories in the media around where it's not worked, where things have gotten wrong, where privacy breaches have happened, or where visibility of what the AI is actually doing from a governance perspective is not necessarily visible and transparent. So, some really key points there. Casey, if we think about your organisation, um, how are you approaching AI? Given we've just heard about the pace of change, that fear of jumping in, but equally the opportunity that it presents. Are the conversations that you're having at the RTA about the customer and the opportunity this presents increasing with a view of AI?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks, Fran. Good afternoon, everyone. And I loved hearing that, Robin, that there's some tools out there because I think that would be part of my approach, knowing there's new ones there. I think here at the RTA, we started with a real foundational piece by creating an AI policy. We wanted to strike the right balance between enabling innovation, but also making sure we maintained that trust, safety, and accountability. That was key. So the policy, it lays the foundation for the responsible use. Obviously, we're a statutory authority, so part of Queensland Government. We wanted to make sure we had that responsible use of current and emerging AI applications. Um, Things like establishing clear guidelines for the usage of the tool, safeguarding any data and privacy, as you alluded to, Fran. We all live in fear of privacy breaches, ensuring ethical application of AI, but also aligning with evolving regulatory frameworks as well. That was important to us. Another piece that we took in parallel, we conducted a really comprehensive operational review to assess our current maturity and identify those future opportunities. Similar to what Robin was saying, a lot of us don't know where to start. So we wanted to really understand our current state first. And it really helped us uncover we were underutilizing some of our existing technology, and that led us to some quick wins really fast as well. But it also ensured we had a clear baseline before we started to develop the roadmap. We wanted to take a really considered and structured approach to it. So we approached it very strategically. We didn't want to jump into any isolated use cases, focused on identifying opportunities that did align with our broader strategic plan. That was really important to us to make sure that it aligned with our organisational goals. Wanted to make sure we kept the right stakeholders informed as well. So this work sits within the division I look after, the customer experience division, but it's shared across our entire ELT exec leadership team because we need to make sure we continue to keep that alignment. We want to avoid duplication, any additional layers or costs that may bring with it, but also really maximise that cross-functional value. So I would say we're still at the very start as well. I wouldn't say we're mature, but we've got some really strong foundational pieces that we've started to as our beginning of our approach.
Thanks, Tracy. And I reckon there would be a lot of organisations, if they did that review of their current state, would identify those opportunities to either optimize what they're doing or identify where they're not actually taking advantage of the tools or the technology that they've already got in place. So some real opportunities there. I know that the research talked a lot about personalisation as a key expectation from customers. How does that match up with what customers are telling you through the feedback you receive and other channels that you have at the RTA?
Yeah, we were definitely hearing very similar feedback through our own research. So, as a regulator, obviously it's very important for us. We need to remain impartial. We have two really distinct customer groups here at the RTA. Obviously, we've got tenants. It's all to do with the rental sector. So we've got tenants who are renting properties, but also the managing parties, which are typically property owners or real estate agents. So they both groups share expectations very similar around, they want low effort, minimal wait times, responsiveness, etc. But our research did show that our tenant base place much greater value on the personalised service. That's far more important to them. They want us to know that we understand their history, their current situation, what's going on for them now. As the managing parties on that end, they deal with this much more frequently. So because it's part of their business model, so their level of knowledge would be higher than many of our tenants. So they were probably more around what's the effort, what's the speed, as our tenant base really wanted that personalised, what's happening in my space, how can you help me? We also saw a very strong uptake of self-service channels, but when the customer does need to speak to us, they want it to be very personalised. There was key service principles we've identified through that research too. It was around wanting tailored and consistent experiences. That was ranked really high. And interestingly, responsiveness was still important, similar to the research from Genesys, where they don't want long wait times, but it wasn't up there at the top, which I think some of us had thought for some time. So it actually ranked lower in our tenant group than the personalisation and seamless service delivery. So I think our customers are telling us a loud message there, what they're valuing most importantly.
Interesting, though, you highlight the need from an organisational perspective to really think about who are your customers when there are multi dimensions to that customer group. And if you can, really kind of get down to that granular, persona of the groups, you can actually make really sensible strategic decisions that, are almost tailored to your specific customer group as well without overcooking it for others. So, yeah, that's really interesting. Robin, if you think about what you're seeing from a customer base in Australia, New Zealand, what are you still seeing as some of the most common applications across the market that people are sort of stepping into that AI component with? What are you seeing sort of take the lead?
Tracy touched on it a little bit. It's around the ability to self-serve. So, those are really good starting points, removing the simple tasks away from agents, getting them to be able to concentrate on those more complex tasks. So, if you want to have a password reset, or you've got a simple question like, when's my next green waste due for collection? Just all of that simple stuff can be and is being taken away, and using AI, chat, that sort of thing, so that people can quickly self-serve. But to Tracy's point again, if they really want to talk to someone, they want to have that really personalized service. So there's finding that balance between those simple tasks and then obviously the more complex tasks with agents. The other one that we're seeing is quality assurance. So, we know that that's a very personalized approach with quality scoring and those sorts of things. But what AI is enabling us to do is review a lot more calls for compliance and tone, for example. So you're not necessarily actually scoring the total conversation, but you're able to do some scoring in that around, was it a compliant call? Did the agent use the correct tone? Those sorts of things. So with that, you can have that, sort of automated side of the quality assurance. And then you've also got that human touch as well, which then can focus on the coaching, which we know is really important. And then there's the agent assist, which supports agents in managing customer inquiries more effectively. We're seeing, articles surfaced when they're on a call. So rather than the agent having to put you on hold, or yourself, you're on a call and you can feel that real delay where that that agent is searching for that information for you. AI can now listen in, and it can provide that particular information to save a lot more time, and it can be a lot more accurate from a customer perspective. And the other one that we're seeing a lot of is obviously customer conversation summaries, which are provided at the end of the call. They help with agent wrap up. They're a lot more accurate. They're a lot more detailed, because sometimes, you know yourself, you think, oh, what did I talk about? And you've got to try and write it down in that wrap up process. So they're a lot more accurate. They're a lot more faster. And we've also had some really good customer data where we've seen reduction in hold time and a reduction in after call work, which of course all of that leads to a reduction in overall costs, because you're able to reduce call times, reduce talk times, and you're able to service more customers. And what we've also seen with that reduction is an improvement in customer satisfaction as well, because they feel like they're getting dealt with in a far more effective and efficient manner.
Imagine there's also some real positives coming out from an employee perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with some of those, you know, tasks that are often tedious at the end of a call, or that constant searching, which builds that frustration. So, you know, getting that balance right is certainly a great
And from an
opportunity for
employee
organisations.
perspective, that the customer frustration does lessen, right? Because they actually feel like you're making progress. I
Yeah.
will give you a poor example. Yesterday, I was on a call. I had done the pyro clean on my oven on the weekend, and it cracked the glass. So goodness knows what I did wrong. But I called into the contact center, and it was not a great experience. I felt like the agent was reading off a checklist. What time did this happen? Have you turned it off at the wall? I was like, I'm not rebooting my PC. I'm wanting to tell you about what's happened to my oven. So, you know, I look at all of these things, and like all of us, when you're in the industry, you have those expectations around how you want to be serviced. And I don't want a checklist of questions. I want that empathy, and I want it to be personalized, and for them to understand that there is something wrong with their product, that it cracks the glass when you do a pyro clean. So I'm not sure, you know, when they do that quality assurance, that they would have been that impressed with my response. But, you know, it does lead to that level of frustration if you're not arming your agents with the right information, and AI can certainly assist with that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example. And I think we're even seeing it before we're talking to agents using script. You know, even on an IVR that, you know, consistently asks you the same thing when, you know, by the time you actually get to the person, that level of frustration is already built or building. And it's certainly, if we're starting to see the applications that are rolling out start to reduce those levels of frustration and anxiety that can then ensue. That's certainly a win for employees, not just for customers, but it's a great opportunity for employees.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So the research touched on probably what I thought was a really interesting big disconnect, and it was in relation to that seamless channel switch, you know, personalisation, etc. And I think from a consumer perspective, it was 97% from consumers, but only 16% of leaders stated that they had that fully integrated omnichannel solution. Now that's a really gap, right? If that's what our customers want, and we all know it, but to then sort of say 16% is where we're kind of hitting, when will we start to see that change? Like, obviously you're doing work with, I mean, it's probably how long's a piece of string, but, you know, some of the organizations you're obviously working with, are they looking at that channel shift? There's nothing more frustrating to have to jump out and then repeat everything, you know?
Look, absolutely. And we've been talking about omnichannel for a million years, haven't we? Like, I remember when we first deployed email for a customer back in, you know, dare I say it, the late 90s, but there was no sort of integration. And almost some of those problems still exist now that existed back then. And the problem is that the back-end systems for customers are siloed, right? So you have lots of different siloed back-end platforms. And therefore, that omni-channel experience is almost impossible to make smooth and seamless from a customer perspective. There really has to be investment in technology and the capabilities to bring those channels together. There is so much data in each of those organizational back-end systems, but that's not being used to craft the right end-to-end journey for each customer. So the customers that we're talking to, they're absolutely aware of it. They're putting in channels such as chat and email, but then they've got to work out how to bring those things all together. And that is still the biggest challenge. And it's around investing and making sure that they don't have those silos in the back end. And until that changes, we are still going to have, it's not going to be a seamless experience for our customers. And I'm not sure, Tracy, whether that's, whether you've made a lot of progress in your organisation, but it's not unique out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. And there are a lot of organisations that are trying to bring together that back end
Absolutely.
with their interaction centre or service hub. But there is still very distinct, dare I say, ownership around some of those distinct silos. And yeah, I wonder if we'll ever truly see them, the silos broken down. But, again, the understanding of how to make the transition between them, feel seamless from a customer perspective, even if it's really, kind of mice running around on, hamster wheels. That's a total mix of analogy there, but you know what I mean. Tracy, if you think about your organisation and that disconnect, from your perspective, is it just, the reason we're not seeing those silos break down, or the reasons we're not seeing that change, that real technological change from internally? Why not for a start? Is it a matter of priorities? Is it that the list is just ever growing as far as business needs go?
I think so. Like, from my experience, I think that's certainly part of it, and I think it would be across quite a broad group. I think it's also technology, it's evolving so rapidly, there's often a real gap in the understanding. And then as you try and you're playing catch up all the time, and it continually moves. So it gives you those shifting priorities. But I suppose that's in terms of capability and in application. But I think what I really found, the research highlighted, so many organisations are still grappling with these siloed departments, and we're no different either here. It's fragmented customer engagement solutions, limited data sharing across the different channels. So it makes it really difficult to deliver that real integrated service experience. I think it also feels a little bit like Australia's taking a bit of a cautious approach. Maybe we're waiting to learn from some of the early adopters. Just from reading the report, it noted that only 30% of the CX leaders plan to implement an integrated CX platform in the next couple of years. That was against 44% globally. So I thought that was a surprising stat as well. So maybe we are being a bit more cautious.
Yeah.
And I think the other one I'd call out is definitely around budget constraints. There's definitely a barrier. A number of organisations, just through my own networking role, they cite limited funding. But I do think with the right planning and partnerships, the modern solutions, they can actually enhance the customer experience, but also drive operational efficiency and cost saving. But it's about doing it right. And as I know I'm repeating myself, it's having that planned strategic approach that delivers back to your own strategic plan. Just jumping in is probably not going to deliver it. You just have that one use case. If it doesn't work, you'll probably be going backwards. So I think it's definitely about shifting that mindset also from cost to value. How is it going to provide value?
I think you picked up a really interesting point there as well, though. We've got organisations that have, X amount of legacy systems operating in silos, all of that. And sometimes when there's, limited resourcing to spend, so limited budget, actually what you want to see is the shiny new, quick, let's jump in here. And sometimes what you get from investing in some of that legacy is just that things are smoother. It's not. So I'm sort of wondering, are we seeing some organisations thinking, well, if I've only got $100 to spend, I need to actually be really thinking about what's the biggest bang now. And sometimes it's not about looking at some of those, the investment to reduce silos, the investment to change legacy systems, to connect systems better. Maybe it's not as seen as something that's going to give as much return on that initial investment. I think what we're all saying, though, is that getting that foundation right will make everything else, actually give you better ROI anyway.
For sure.
Interesting. Another key theme throughout was this concept of service as a business driver. And you touched on it before, but I would say we've seen significant change over the past, say, 3 years in relation to the influence that CX contact centres more broadly have within an organisation on not just strategy, but decisions. Based on your experience, Tracy, do you think we've seen that shift moving where, organisations constantly saw contact centres as the cost centre? Are we starting to see that more as that strategic asset when it comes to things like customer loyalty, retention, satisfaction, all of that?
Yeah, I think to put really simply, my simple answer would be yes. I think the days of viewing that contact center, purely as a cost center are long gone. I think in most successful organizations, it's now recognized as a real multi-channel customer experience hub. It's that critical touch point that's really driving that retention, loyalty, overall business performance becomes so important. And I think even in government, I know it can be different between a lot of our corporates and government, but even here, like where growth and sales, they're not our primary drivers, but I can still see the shift is quite evident. We do report publicly and through different like ministerial channels, things like that on key customer metrics. So here at the RTA, we'd have two core ones that are public facing. So that sits at customer satisfaction and also a dispute resolution ranks well for a dispute resolution service. So both of those are essential in demonstrating that we're delivering value to the Queensland rental community, but also in shaping broader organisational decisions as well. So I think in government it can just be done a little differently, but still very important that it's not just might have the high FTE, but certainly not just the cost centre of years gone by, where that is what many of us were seeing in across different organisations I've certainly been part of.
Love that. It's definitely a maturing of the industry itself. But you did touch on an interesting point there. There is such a difference often between government and large corporates or small corporates in how they view customer. If you think about your customers, they don't have a choice who they operate with. You're the regulatory body that provides them with the services that they need at a point in time. So they don't have a choice as far as that service provision. How do you ensure that your focus on service excellence remains front of mind? Back in the day, government would be like, well, it doesn't matter if people have to wait an hour. They've still got to call us. How do you make sure, regardless of the fact that you're government, that the service focus is embedded through your people?
Yeah, and that's so true, Fran. As a statutory body, we don't operate in a competitive environment, but it doesn't lessen our responsibilities by any means. In fact, I'd say it heightens it. We're entrusted with delivering services out to the community. We're funded by public money. I think with that comes a strong accountability framework as well as that extra responsibility there. Our budget requests, they go through an incredibly rigorous process. So having the right metrics in place is absolutely key to demonstrating value and impact. It's essential to the success of any kind of funding that we request. So I guess for me, in my experience, embedding that customer experience and service excellence into both strategic and operational plans is key. It ensures you've really got that customer first culture. So where you talked about our employees. So having that customer first culture across the workplace, and it keeps service delivery really front of mind when you're linking it back to your key plans. And if you've done that vision setting really well, your staff are have that awareness, but they're also actually feeling very aligned and connected to it as well. So I think you've got to take a long-term view. So tracking things like cost to serve, look at the benefit realizations, but also service optimization. They're what's going to ensure your sustainability. And I think one of the biggest challenges in government is that customers often view us as one government. So, appreciating I'm part of Queensland government, so they expect us to have very connected services, but public service is large. It's where we talk about silos. If you're talking about the whole of a state government, it's a very significant size. So it is going to be siloed. Here in Queensland, service delivery, it's largely agency led. Each agency leads their own. That can be really frustrating for customers. They just think they're ringing Queensland government, so it should just be that one-stop shop, and it very rarely is the case. So quite often for the same situation, they might be navigating different departments because there's just some slight nuances with it. So it's key having cross-agency collaboration, shared commitment, the service excellence. They're all so important to the success of when you're having such a large organisation that covers such a diverse range of services as well.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And again, you'll be dealing with customers at different stages and different levels of vulnerability as well. If I think about some of your customers, you know, when they do talk to you, they're quite frustrated about other circumstances that are not in your control. But actually the experience that they remember is the one they're having with you. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge to have. Robin, I know, you know, if I think back several years, there was an absolute focus on shifting, you know, off-premise onto cloud for organisations, and the research showed that only a third of CX organisations had fully migrated to the cloud, which does have a flow-on impact to, you know, AI deployments, etc. And whilst I think it's important to note we're still well ahead of, you know, when compared to other regions, do you think we will see this figure continue to grow? I had someone talking to me last week saying, oh, you know, maybe we need to go back to thinking about, you know, keeping things on premise. And I was just like, whoa, interesting. Yeah, like, do you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, it's like this full circle moment. I was like, what? Interesting.
It's really interesting because I work across APAC, right? And in ANZ, we are, you know, as you say, we're well ahead of the curve. And in fact, at our CX Tour event in Auckland and Wellington back at the end of July, we announced that New Zealand will be the first country for Genesys where all customers are on cloud. So we're in the final stages of migrating the last of our legacy customers to the cloud. So, you know, we're really proud of that.
That's huge, actually.
It is, as a country and a region. The interesting thing for me, though, in working across APAC is, you know, some of those countries really are well behind in terms of their desire even to move to the cloud. So it's not even that.
What do you think drives that? What contributes to that view?
They're fascinating conversations that I have with people. Some of it really comes down to cost, to a lack of trust in the cloud. They like to own all of their platforms and control all of that platforms. So obviously, as soon as you take them to cloud, they lose that bit of hands-on control. They want to determine when they're going to upgrade their platform. They want to determine how they build their servers. So there's quite a mindset that goes with that shift. But in the ANZ region, we moved there quite a long time ago. You know, in my old role, we moved customers, you know, 5-6 years ago to the cloud. And yes, it was I guess, for them, it was sort of new and it was challenging. And it was also a mind shift change for the people that worked with me, because suddenly these engineers have gone from building out all of these platforms to really only, and I say only, not disrespectfully, but configuring it. Like, they don't own all of that legacy platform anymore. But what they get to do is some really cool stuff around developing and creating, and it's helping people change their mindset around what does cloud actually enable you to do. It enables you to focus on the things that can make a difference to your business. Building servers and doing all of that stuff, that's not important. That keeps you up and running. But what's the experience that you want to deliver to your customers? And that's where cloud enables you to think about all of that stuff and drive some good outcomes there. So, you know, I think ANZ definitely well ahead of the game. The problems that we see here is that they move one of their platforms to the cloud, but they don't bring in, you know, those siloed departments that we've already talked about, right? And so those things there are what can hold them back on being able to implement, you know, a simple AI solution or something like that, because once again, they're very disjointed. So I'm going to move all of my contact center to the cloud, but I'm going to leave everything else. Yeah. And so therefore nothing can actually talk to each other or integrate. So in this region, while we've made a really massive inroads on getting to the cloud, there's still a lot of other things that need to align to, you mentioned it, Fran, how do they take advantage of all of
Yeah.
those tools and technologies that are out there? Well, they've actually got to bring everything on board to be able to do
Yeah.
that with
And
impact.
it's suddenly, you're right, it opens up such opportunity as far as, there's something new they can try, but it's the pace with which it allows them to move. It's not this delay, old school implementation. I think back to implementations, from
Well,
years
we
ago,
talk
and
about
it's
fail
like, oh,
fast.
yeah,
Right? So you get that opportunity in the cloud to do that. We think about things that we wanted to do for customers years ago, and it was a massive investment. You've got to buy
yeah,
3 servers, and you've got to buy some additional software, and you've got to do all of this. And this project for one simple thing took months, years. Whereas now in the cloud, you actually get to try all of those things in your dev environment if you want to, and then go,
yeah.
actually, this is worse or better, or actually we're going to tweak it, and we can deliver some really smart outcomes for the employee and for our customers. So yeah, but again, all of those things have to align. So when you're thinking about that next phase of what it is that you want to deliver for your customer from an AI perspective, what does that look like at the back end of your organization?
And do you find that you're working with, so if you've got a customer that they're all in with their contact center, so their solutions there, but that back end is really sort of pulling them backwards as far as what that possibility is. Are you helping them navigate that? Are you sort of
Yeah,
pushing and
absolutely.
challenging and supporting them to try and get that silo mentality kind of out the window?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we've got teams that specialize in that. We can use really good
Yeah.
customer case studies, and they're all on our website if you want to check them out, about just where do I start? What are some of the cool things that people have done with that technology stack? The other part of it is, selfishly from our perspective, people buy, these licenses and then they don't utilize them, right? Because they haven't thought about, oh, I can't actually do that properly because I haven't got this back end system on the same sort of cloud process. So from our perspective, it's all around adoption, and it's around how do we actually get you to use the technology to the best of its capabilities that will make a massive difference for your organization. So yeah, we don't want to just put that technology out there. We want people to really benefit from it. So we do spend times, and as a community, we've got Genesys, we've got our partners, we work really well together to help our customers get the right outcomes.
Because at the end of the day, right, it is what drives the industry forward. We talk about this all the time, but actually you want to see it working well as well, particularly when you know what it can do. You know what it can do through
Absolutely.
your case studies. You want that for people. You want that for your customers. So yeah, well, hopefully we're going to start to see more of that pick up, more of that connect from back office, to really, sort of think differently about silos. What else was in the report, Tracy, that you found interesting or that stood out for you? And, we'll make sure in the email that we send after the webinar, everyone will get a copy and access to the full report. But, I would encourage everybody to really have a good look at it and think about what it reflects, but also of the industry itself. But what does it do when you think about your own organisation? Were there other things that stood out for you, Trace?
Yeah, I think the one that stood out really surprised me was around 58% of consumers in the ANZ region, they listed email as one of their most preferred customer service channels. That was higher than any other APAC region as well. I I'd kind of made an assumption, which clearly I was quite wrong. Yet many organisations were moving away from email in favour of more immediate or interactive channels. So it was really unexpected for me to see it, that it still ranked so highly. So I guess if others have made similar assumptions, it definitely warrants us all having a closer look at our own customer interaction data to see what's going on there. It's a good reminder. Customer preferences don't always follow industry trends, and the key really is listening to what customers actually want. That's what shapes the effective service strategies that we should all have in place. So I guess it also reinforced the importance of working with trusted technology partners. That's key as well. They play such a critical role in helping us interpret these insights. They'll help us challenge the assumptions, because I really had made that assumption. But also, more importantly, implementing solutions that will be both customer centric and future ready. I think having trusted tech partners is really key to helping organisations do that incredibly well.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a really good call out. Email's an interesting one, right? Because I think for 10 years we've said it was going to disappear and nobody wants to use it, and we're not going to let you use it. And there's definitely this difference between an organization's perspective of the right channel as opposed to a customer or a consumer. But even as you were then talking, I'm thinking about my life, my day life. You guys might be the same. We live in our inbox, right? So it's, again, if I'm a consumer and I'm at work 9 to 5, but I've still got this life admin I need to do and I'm living in an inbox, it's actually really easy for me to just send an email. So I think we kind of miss some of that sometimes and expect, well, it would be easier for you, Fran, to log on to some system and use a portal and do this and do that. Actually, it's not. It's so much easier for me to send an email right now because I'm in my inbox. But you're right, challenging those assumptions. And sometimes it's because we're so entrenched in thinking what's actually best from an organizational perspective, as opposed to what's the choice that the customer's saying that they want. So yeah, an interesting one. And you're right, a great chance to reflect on what do the numbers say and what does it mean for your assumptions and your preconceived ideas around progressive interactions, etc. Robin, what about you? So there's probably loads in there that you could give us, little gold gems
Yeah, it's
about.
funny that
But
Tracy said,
yeah,
that she said email, because I had a couple of years ago when I first looked at this report, I had exactly the same reaction. I was like, wow, email, that is, and it hasn't changed over those years. At percentage points might have dropped a little bit, but it is still deemed to be one of the key channels of choice. And I think it comes down to the fact that, to your point, Fran, around people working in that space, but it also gives you the opportunity to clearly articulate what your problem is, what you want them to do about it, and what your expectations are around that. That's quite hard to do in a chat or in a menu where you get to state what your problem is. That's quite hard when you're trying to self-serve. And so I think that's why email is definitely still deemed to be an essential tool, and particularly in this region, because we use email as a business tool a lot, and therefore people want to continue to use that in their day-to-day life. The other one that I not so much intrigued me, but maybe frustrated me, was that it talked about that nearly a quarter of consumers cited repeatedly encountering the same minor or annoying issues during service interactions. I'm like, wow, are we still, in that space where we can't just solve those tiny, annoying little things? Like, focus on the quick wins, and then that makes your customer happy. It keeps them there, because there is that stat that talks about after, I think it's 5 or might even be less interactions, then they will move to somewhere else if you can't service them properly. And sometimes it might be that little tiny niggly thing that tips them over the edge. So I was quite intrigued when I saw that stat, when I was thinking, how hard is it for people to really understand what is it that those little things that you could improve that would give your customers a much better experience? And so rather than focusing on the big things, sometimes we actually just need to come back to the basics and really look at what is it that our customers need from us, and what does that experience feel like? Put yourself in their shoes. What are those tiny little annoying things that we could fix really easily for them?
that I think I had an interaction yesterday. I'm not going to say who it was with, but it was with bank, and I called up and spoke to the contact center, and the person I was speaking to, it was a follow-up call. It's actually my third follow-up call. And it would appear that the advice I've gotten each time has not quite been right. And the gentleman I spoke to yesterday, he said to me, "Oh, I can see what they've done, Fran, because I normally work in another area that your interaction would actually get escalated to." He said, "Unfortunately, I can't actually help you and fix it because I'm considered contact center today." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "I've finally got someone who can actually solve the problem for me." And he goes, "Yeah, but unless I'm in my normal role, I can't help you." And it made me think about that whole piece around empowered and trusted. And, how do we create a workforce that, can be empowered to solve problems, so that I don't go, this is too hard. I am going to take my business elsewhere or whatever. Just is frustrating from a customer lens, but it was equally frustrating for him. He desperately wanted to help me and knew that if he did, he would be in all sorts of strife. So it goes back to some of those processes and mindsets that we have organizationally, as opposed to whether it's technology or, silos, etc. Because his was a classic, I work in this other silo. But yeah, I just thought all of those simple things around, I don't know, true service and, challenging people to look outside the script and look above and beyond for ways to resolve things. Really hit home for me yesterday. And it was interesting because I'd read this report again on the weekend, and it was kind of, like there's all these opportunities around the basic, as you say, Robin, to get those right.
Maybe
we
we
could
should
talk
share
about
that
that a lot.
report with the
Yeah.
bank.
Maybe we should, but it's probably actually a really similar story in a lot of organisations, is probably what I highlight. So, right.
Absolutely.
As far as your role is X, and the process is Y, and we escalate, so therefore you take the next call. So there is something to be said about, if we can remove lots of that low value hanging fruit, can we actually empower the people that are having the interactions more to do whatever they can do to support, regardless of what job they're in today? How can they do that, mindful of guidelines and those parameters as well? Trace, you've worked in a lot of organisations. Does that resonate with you? That sort of a process-driven kind of construct?
Absolutely. It makes me cringe as well, because you just see it, you think he could have solved it for you like that, but probably would have been penalised potentially in his own KPIs or whatever he's measured against. So I think you use the absolute right term. It's empowering. Let people do what they do best and resolve issues, provide solutions. That's what we should be all striving for.
Do you think some of that's because we are so used to that historic contact center environment that even though we're pushing for it to change, sometimes we default back to some of the rigor and the limitations, I guess, or the restrictions that we're a part of kind of creating. I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, because I think I was going to say it's about the maturity of the organisation. But to be honest, I think most of the financial institutions will have, automated probably faster than a lot of other organisations. So you think they would have nailed the complex ones quicker as well. But from your experience, no, that hasn't happened yesterday.
Look, and maybe there's a little bit of gun shy given the environment at the moment with certain things, and that's always the challenge with balance, right? So yeah. Anything else, Robin, that you thought was worthy of a call out?
I think the whole report just reflects what I liked about it. That reflects what's going on in our region. We do have high expectations when we call in. The other one was around you don't need to contact us. Like, you don't need to be proactive out there calling us. We much prefer to call in on our own terms. But when we do contact you, we want it to be hyper personalized. We want you to know all about us, and we want to be treated with respect and with a lot of accurate knowledge and with speed. So I think other countries do have that more "we'll contact you" approach, but definitely I think if we all see numbers come up on our phones that aren't in our contact list, we sort of ignore them. But we want to engage on our terms, and that's generally around when I call you, I want you to know who I am, and I want you to deal with my issues fast.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I think some of the tools that you touched on earlier, particularly things like Agent Assist, the note summaries, as far as the audit trails and things like that it provides, are you seeing a real change in confidence as well? Like that number one, speed to competency for people, if you've got those additional guardrails, an Agent Assist provides, it doesn't just help you think about that competence differently, But are you seeing organisations rely more on those to actually help with some of that personalisation?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess those things take up less time, right? So they're
Yeah.
automated. So it does mean that the agent can take more time on that call and have more care with that person that they're speaking with, rather than thinking, I've got to rush through this, I've got to get all of this done at the end of the call. It actually does help to relax the agent and makes them more engaging. And also when they're not having to search through stuff, thinking, where am I going to find the answer to that? When it's automatically being populated for them, that definitely helps their approach as well. So I think, both things from an agent perspective, we talked about this before, it's much better for them, and it's also providing a much better customer experience as well.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity to have that interaction go to almost that piece of what they're going to need next comes also from that ability with the agent assist. It really means you can actually build out that next expected interaction or next
Yeah,
best action
absolutely.
that you can actually raise there and then, which I think actually gives us a real opportunity to think differently about that tailored service. If you're suddenly the support tool that lets you identify how you can next best help, not just about today. You're right, you're moving away from a transactional component that is just based on the interaction or the inquiry that they called with, to suddenly being able to think about, well, what's going to be next? How do I next support you? And how do I give you that information now to set you on your way or help you resolve it without it being a problem? I would love to see that continue to increase across the networks. I am mindful of time. Is there any last points? I know, Robin, we are going to provide the link to the report so people can, have a good read and sort of see where they sit within some of those different components. And I would challenge all of you to really look at it that way. Actually think about your service and your customer for the different components that it's actually referencing. And give yourself the opportunity to kind of reflect on ways that you could think differently with things that are in your control, and as Robin said, really leverage and optimize some of the tools that you already have. But how do you build some of that research and what it is that customers want to that future strategy? Huge opportunity. Great. And it is great to see that we are doing well in the market, Robin. So it was
It is.
definitely
And my
nice to
last
see that.
point, for my last point is just don't be afraid to give it a go. We now have
Yeah.
got AI studios, we have got AI guides. Go and have a look at that and just try that one little thing, work it out. What does that mean for you? I know it's got to be part of a bigger strategy, but if you're really unsure about where to start, just start having a little play that you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
And you don't have to deploy it into your own environment, production environment, but you can have a play in your dev environment. And I'd highly recommend that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Tracy, what about you? Any last thoughts?
I just strongly encourage everyone read the report. It's really fascinating insights. I think anyone working in this industry will definitely benefit from reading it. You'll get a lot out of it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Tracy. Again, I think we could talk about some of the outcomes from this, for a lot longer. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed it. We'll send out the details with a link to the report. And if they've got questions, I'm sure, Robin, they can come through to Genesys and talk about those.
Absolutely.
Let's take the next step. Super exciting. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest
Thank you,
of your day.
everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.